I am a senior at my high school, and I'm in the second year of the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program. And my high level subject, one of my high level subjects, is psychology. And I love psychology. It goes without saying. It's a extremely interesting subject. So as I was trying to find a book which could nurture my love for psychology and my understanding, I also wanted to search for a book which could help me learn more about gender differences in society, gender inequality, and gender biases, because that's another thing I'm very interested in. And that's when I came across The Gendered Brain, the new neuroscience that shatters the myth of the female brain by Gina Rippon. So today I wanted to share with you the key takeaways I had from this piece of work and how it challenged my preconceived notions about the male and female brain and all the most interesting things I learned from reading this book. So let's go straight into it. Rippon's book takes us on a historical journey, and it goes back in time to really explain the perspectives and opinions doctors and psychologists had. So this can be dated back to the 18th century. And at that time, there was a prevailing belief that female biology was inherently deficient and fragile. And as you can imagine, these ideas had far-reaching negative consequences on how society viewed and treated women. So, interestingly, in the 19th century, there was a sort of peculiar obsession among doctors who wanted to measure the weight of brains to see if these preconceived notions were true of the differences in female and male brains. And like bird seeds were poured into empty skulls in order to measure the capacity by using a scale. And it was found that there was no real mass difference between male and female brains. So there was a shift in perspective. People stopped declaring inferiority but began asserting that differences were complementary and that women possessed unique qualities like intuition, as I've written here, to compensate for their perceived educational and political inadequacies. This is really interesting because there's no actual proof or research that shows that women have or had or have educational or political inadequacies either now or at the time. But this was simply a socio-cultural expectation. So that's another important thing to keep in mind. There was also another thing that's challenged in this book is the long-standing notion of a woman's menstrual cycle, and specifically the belief that a woman's period can negatively affect her ability to concentrate. Recent research, on the other hand, as mentioned in the book The Gendered Brain, suggests a connection between the ovulatory and post-ovulatory phases in the menstrual cycle and positive behavioral changes, such as improved cognitive processing. And this actually fully turns the tables on conventional wisdom and ideas and really forces us to reconsider our assumptions about the female brain. It's interesting to see how ideas from so long ago may still be present in people's minds and how shocking such simple research can really be. Now, one of the key takeaways from the books is that there were gender differences found between male and female brains, but though they are statistically significant, they are incredibly small. In fact, these differences are so minute, so subtle, that it's not really possible to reliably determine an individual's gender purely based on their brain scans. Isn't that fascinating? Just by looking at brain scans, it's not possible to determine an individual's gender or sex at birth. And this itself dispels the notion of a distinct male and female brain. And also, as I've written here, emphasizes the remarkable diversity that exists within each gender. Now, one thing I've learned in my psychology classes at school is neuroplasticity or brain plasticity. In the past, it was believed that the brain remains static. At a certain point, it stops changing. It molds during youth, but then remains permanent. But this has been disproved by many studies, such as Maguire et al., which show that there's constant changes in the brain. It's possible to happen at any age. And this neuroplasticity can actually strengthen the neural networks in the brain. And I don't want to go on a tangent, but the simple practice of neuroplasticity in elderly ages can help reduce the likelihood of dementia. But that's for another day. Neuroplasticity is extremely interesting. And the reason I put Maguire et al. Here is just to give a small example from, this is actually the first study we ever learned in psychology. And it talks about taxi drivers who have a extreme reliance on spatial navigation have larger left posterior hippocampi than control participants, because the left posterior hippocampi are needed for spatial navigation, and thus there's more neuroplasticity there, strengthening of neural networks, and thus it increases in volume. But we digress, and we'll go back to this presentation. So this, in general, emphasizes the fact that neuroplasticity and brain plasticity exists, emphasizes the profound influence of how the biased social environment can actually shape individual brains. And this is an essential insight in an increasingly interconnected world. One has to be really careful about the information they allow change their brain. Now, it's also important to consider social cognitive neuroscience, which takes a center stage in this book and highlights the power of our brains in constructing our identities as social beings. So, as you can see here, I've thrown a couple of phrases which we learn in psychology, which all play a role in how one forms beliefs and ideas. So I'll go one by one. Social cognitive theory is a theory that people adopt ideas and beliefs based on the observation of other people who they might see as role models, or people who are within their culture, and if their role models are given positive feedback, then they think it's a good thing for them to replicate it as well. So the fact that these ideas and preconceived notions haven't really been challenged in the past can show that it's understandable why people think it's fine to keep these beliefs of extreme differences in the brain between women and men, whereas in reality there aren't that many differences. And vicarious reinforcement is simply another way of saying positive feedback or negative feedback. So if someone's positively vicariously reinforced, that means that they are told that what they're doing is fine and are encouraged to do it further, whilst negative vicarious reinforcement is the opposite. Then there are gatekeepers, which are people who can control the information passed down. Gatekeepers are vital in society. These can be parents, teachers, educators, even priests or the government, and the information they pass down, they decide what information is passed down to you. And that once again can help form our beliefs and stereotypes. So that goes on to stereotypes. Stereotypes are easy ways of imagining the world. They're a type of schema, which is an automatic, energy-saving thing that is resistant to change and can affect our behavior. So gatekeepers can help form stereotypes, and this can be enhanced through vicarious reinforcement. So it really just goes to show how much influence there is of society on the beliefs we had and how hard it is for us to change them. So this book in general, even though it doesn't mention these 5 specific things, it does offer a compelling perspective on how gendered stereotypes can pose a real threat to the development of equitable and unbiased brains. So the gender gap that persists in this gender gap does exist in various aspects of society, especially in science and technology, and this is a cause for concern. So Rippin sheds light on how these disparities can result in the underutilization of valuable human capital. And there are also higher instances of depression, social anxiety, and eating disorders among women, which is a pressing issue that can't be ignored. So this once again underscores the human cost of perpetuating gender stereotypes. So in general, the book The Gendered Brain by Gina Rippin is extremely thought-provoking. I found it really interesting, and it linked perfectly to the psychology I'm learning at school. And it's also challenged the long-standing myths about the male and female brains that I've heard around me, that I've grown up hearing and maybe even believing. And it really compels me, and I compel you to reevaluate your beliefs and attitudes. And I encourage you to help create a world where our brains can thrive free from the constraints of gender biases. So I hope you do take this into account, and I found this book extremely interesting. I hope you did too. Make sure to like and subscribe for more book reviews or topics or videos on similar topics. So like and subscribe below. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.